Thanks for joining us in today's webinar, Beyond the Hype, Contact Center AI That Works, presented by Customer Experience Update and Customer Contact Central, sponsored by eGain. I'm Nicholas Rodriguez, the site editor of Customer Experience Update and Customer Contact Central, and I'm excited to bring you today's session in the contact center and artificial intelligence spaces with Sam Hahn, who will bring you hard-earned insights about trends, proven use cases, best practices, and real-world at-scale success stories for contact center AI. I'm really looking forward to interviewing and talking with today's speaker in what will likely prove to be an interesting and amusing conversation. So before we go any further, I would like to thank eGain for sponsoring the webinar series and helping us to make this happen. eGain Customer Engagement Solutions power digital transformation for leading brands. Our top-rated cloud applications for social, mobile, web, and contact centers help clients deliver connected customer journeys in an omni-channel world. To learn more about eGain, visit egain.com. Thanks again, eGain. And on that note, please feel free to ask questions during today's session. You can do so by submitting them into the question panel on the right side of your screen. We will answer as many questions as we can by the end of the presentation. My lovely colleague Emily will be fielding your questions today. She will be happy to answer any questions you might have, so pull up the question panel and say hello to let her know that you're listening. And lastly, if you have any audio issues during today's presentation, you may wish to choose to dial in by phone. To dial in by phone, select the More button in the upper right portion of your screen and then select the Switch to Phone option. So today, I'm talking to Sam Hahn, Technology Evangelist for eGain Corporation. Sam helps clients leverage digital engagement, knowledge management, and applied AI to deliver easy experiences to their customers and contact center agents. Before joining eGain, he served as Vice President of Engineering of Purisma Incorporated and was a co-founder of DocuMagics Inc., a personal document management software company, and served as its Chief Technology Officer. Sam also did grad work with Stanford, as well as he has led a children's orchestra in Palo Alto starting in the 80s all the way through the early 90s. Sam has collaborated with Telecom, Techknowledge, and Inference Corporation, and Inference Corporation's core part of their assets now belong to eGain. So at this time, I'd like to turn things over to Sam, so please take it away.
Thank you, Nick. This is a real honor. I really enjoy this opportunity, and thank you very much for that introduction. I actually wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about that reference you made to my early days with artificial intelligence, because I did a couple of years of grad work at Stanford University. And some of you may remember that the two companies, Telecom and Techknowledge, that Nick mentioned, were direct spin-offs from the Stanford AI group. So the people I worked with were Ed Feigenbaum, Penny Nee, Bruce DeLogge, Barbara Hayes-Roth, Rick Hayes-Roth, and many of them went on into executive positions at Techknowledge and Telecom. The interesting case here is that Inference Corporation was the third big AI company at that time, and it's no coincidence that eGain, recognizing the value very, very early of these technologies, acquired the IP assets of Inference Corporation approximately 19 or 20 years ago. So that's a little bit about how my path and the eGain path sort of come together. So what I'm going to talk about today is something that unfortunately is necessary because of the way that cycles around artificial intelligence and AI have come and gone. So some of you who have been around perhaps longer than me, but almost as long as me also, do recognize that AI has had several different waves of exuberance, as well as you could call them valleys or troughs of disappointment or disillusionment. And so what that really means is that occasionally people think, we have the answer. AI is already understood. We can build it all now. Okay, so then that serves a cycle of investment and excitement. And unfortunately, these cycles typically have waned as the promises have not yet been fulfilled. So that happened in the late 70s. There was a trough there when, you know, the old expert systems and medical diagnostics technologies didn't actually turn out to be as widespread and as ubiquitous and as, let's say, general application as people had thought. But then in the early 80s, there was another wave of excitement because it was all initiated by a Japanese investment of about $100 million and about 40 of their smartest computer software engineers. They called the 40 Samurai. And that was also about the time that Ed Feigenbaum published a book on the fifth generation computing. So that again stimulated another whole cycle of investment, which was again very exuberant and resulted in these companies, Technology, Inference, and Telecorp being founded. And they actually then, through various different specializations and market niches, began to find their application in very narrow domains. And they've all been acquired now. So that entered another valley of disillusionment, shall I say, in the early 80s. But in the late 90s, there was another uptick. And that is actually when the whole CRM phenomenon got really big. Some of you may remember Siebel Systems. I was actually at Siebel for 7 years as well, running part of their engineering organization. And right about that time, with the boom in .com and internet technologies and SaaS, that was when eGain was founded. The reason I want to go through this history is because AI has come and gone, come and gone, come and gone. And interestingly, we are now, in my opinion, at a stage where finally the hardware, the maturation of the techniques, the availability of data, and the understanding of what's realistic finally culminates in another cycle, which I'm hoping we don't characterize as exuberance, but we characterize as cautious, realistic expectations. And that's what I would really like to focus on, is beyond the hype. Let's get beyond the hype. Let's not focus on the promises that are so unrealistic. Let's focus on what we know how to do, because I'm going to show you that for 20 years now, we at eGain have been delivering very focused, very applicable and high impact solutions based on some of these technologies that were acquired 20 years ago. So we probably have as much experience or more than almost anyone else out there delivering artificial intelligence. So we actually have at the core of the company not only the AI technologies that I just referenced, but eGain is a customer engagement company. So what that really means is we allow the enterprise to have conversations, whether they're written conversations or whether they're voice conversations or whether they're actually video or co-browsing conversations, anything having to do with customer issues. So that number of channels is really where eGain got its start. eGain started with email and chat and has built out a very broad range of channels ever since then. But always at the core was the knowledge management and artificial intelligence that actually allows these agents to be smarter, quicker, more responsive to the enterprise customers who are calling in and contacting the enterprise for whatever issue they need resolved, okay? So I want to focus a little bit here, and the point of this slide is that we focus on certain very specific verticals that have leveraged eGain particularly well. Financial services and insurance is one large category. And here, I want to tell you very specifically a case study involving H&R Block later on in this talk. We have a number of actually all of these names are very recognizable. And our second category is telecom. It turns out that the retail telecom business in Europe and now in the US is one of our largest segments, largest verticals. And I'm in particular able to tell you about one of those case studies later on in this talk as well, a company called EE. Actually, I'm surprised it doesn't appear in this particular slide. Retail and manufacturing is another one. It turns out that for product catalogs with thousands or tens of thousands of products, you can imagine how difficult it would be for any agent to always be on top of every single development on every one of these products. So having a good foundation of knowledge management is key when your product suite is quite large. It turns out more recently, in the last 4 or 5 years, federal and state government has been extremely accepting of the kind of offerings that we have. And we're able to cut down interaction times. And I'll talk about another case study in this particular vertical later on in this talk as well. And then in utilities, it turns out that this is surprisingly, to me anyway, one of the areas where the companies have found a lot of leverage in being able to service their customers by actually getting them engaged, giving them right updates, reaching out proactively to tell them about certain account issues. So these are the 5 verticals that we have found quite receptive of the offerings that we are placing into the market. So I wanted to give you a quick view on the way we view our offerings. As I mentioned, on the left are those channels that we allow an enterprise or empower an enterprise to use to interact with their customers. As I mentioned, down at the bottom, you see mail. That was our very earliest product. Chat, in a component we now call Super Chat, is our second. And actually, we've been delivering this now for quite a number of years. And in the last 2 or 3 years, we've really seen an upsurge of interest in chat. It's almost now a necessity. It's part of being able to play the game in the e-commerce space now. So chat is necessary. Companies are recognizing it. And now beyond chat, which is almost treated as a commodity product, we now have to include other capabilities like co-browsing, messaging, SMS interactions, click-to-calls. So we kind of group them all together into this offering we call Super Chat. Co-browse is an interesting scenario here because basically the premise here is don't tell me, show me. And with a call or with a chat, you can't really do that. But with co-browsing, you can. You can actually see where the customer's pointer is. The customer can see where the agent's pointer is. They can be looking at the same web page. And the agent could, in fact, depending on your business rules, be doing some of the work on behalf of the customer as well. So this is co-browse. We've been offering that for about a decade or so. Call Track is our voice call session management solution. We have secure messaging, and many of you have already encountered this kind of interaction channel because you don't necessarily want to send private confidential information via non-secure channels like web or emails or chats. So you want them to actually come to your website, log in, and establish a secure session with you to get that message. That's a product we call secure messaging. Notify is particularly interesting in that it actually serves long-running business processes. So rather than real-time interaction between a customer and an agent, Notify actually takes very long processes such as application processes or medical prescription fulfillment or loan application processes or even tax refund processes, and will update you with outbound emails or text messages as the status of that application changes. And we process hundreds of millions of these notifications for various ones of our customers. In fact, one very familiar name you'll probably come across is CVS. If any of you actually fulfill your prescriptions with CVS and you get text messages that your prescription is ready to be picked up and here's the closest location to you, those are actually powered by eGain. One of our more interesting channels is an offers channel. And this is something we call proactive offers. So as we look at a customer's web journey through your website, and we notice certain patterns, Let's say you're on a shopping cart site with a value that's greater than a certain amount, and maybe you've actually been on there for more than 45 seconds. We may actually pop up a piece of content that says, would you like help with an agent? Or if you actually want to go that far, you can say, act now, you can get a 5% discount. But anyway, those are all offers you can configure on the fly. And so I'm just itemizing because we increasingly add to this as each version of the product is released. So right now we're focused on really extending the number of channels through our social network. So Facebook, for example, is a recent one. Twitter has been added. Instagram is about to come online very, very soon. So anyway, we continue to add to these channels because this is where customers want to engage with enterprises. I think I've been through the core components in the middle, but let me just say there are three main components to this AI and knowledge set of offerings that we've had in our platform. The first is something we call guided process. This is the logic-based, although it's not something that's scripted. It's actually it's case-based reasoning for those of you that understand that technology, which means you don't script. You actually write certain conditions, you ask certain questions, and based on patterns of answers, the solutions will appear in the most relevant and most applicable way. So as the agent is interacting with customers, customers may be offering certain information not in the order that any particular script will require, but that information can always be incorporated into a case base at any time. And we just focus on the remaining items that need to be asked without a prefixed preset script. So that's something we call case-based reasoning. Another component is something we call the virtual agent. Some of you know this as chatbots. So we've had one of these also since the early 2000s or late 2000s actually. And what this is of course the interaction with an automated system that says, what are you asking about? Why are you here today? What is the nature of your call? And the first 4, 5, 6 of those issues can result in two things. Either the system can figure out what you need and direct you exactly to the solution, or it can actually gather this correct context and give it to a live agent, so that the live agent, by the time the agent sees it and interacts with the customer, they've already got the context. They already know what the issue is, and they don't have to re-ask those questions again and again. So that's our virtual assistant, otherwise known as the chatbot. Our latest offering, which is kind of embedded in here, is a feedback mechanism that is based on machine learning. And the machine learning will take all of this operational data and try to refine it, try to optimize it, and try to categorize it so that always the performance of the system, whether it's automated and interacting directly with the customer, or assisting a live agent and letting the agent interact with the customer, those could always be improved day after day as the data gets processed over and over again through our machine learning mechanics systems. On the right are the reporting and analytics offerings we have. So with all of this operational data, we can then put together extremely detailed views and extremely large-scale aggregated views as well of your entire operation, whether it's workforce planning and management, or whether it's effectiveness of certain channels, or whether it's looking at which pages on your website generate the most queries and the most calls, so that you can actually improve those particular pages, or maybe insert an FAQ there, or offer a live chat there. We have all of these able to be enabled by the analytics and the journey analysis and machine learning, because we have all of this data. So this is an extremely broad product footprint that eGain has put together. It's because we've had a couple of decades to do this. So we like to think that we're very experienced in customer engagement. We've seen not only what customers need, but we also have packages and package patterns and combinations of solutions that are really very effective against these verticals that I just mentioned earlier. We also like to keep things simple. We know that in a contact center, customers are calling not with complex things usually, but very simple needs. Usually it's, tell me something I don't know, or do something for me, please. Update something for me, or send me something, or whatever, okay? Change something for me. Or fix something. Something's not working. Tell me what's wrong. Tell me what to replace, or, find out where the problem is, okay? So by taking this particular view, a very simple view of what customers are really engaging about, then we can actually apply our tools and our learning and our AI towards trying to simplify and automate and improve these particular processes. As always, this is not going to comprise 100%, but if you do this well enough, that you can actually develop, you can dedicate your agents then to the more complex issues that customers may be calling about. The other thing to realize with customer engagement is, if we were very inexperienced, we would take the position, okay, well, customer, please tell me what you want, and we'll just immediately do it. It turns out with more experience, you know that more conversation is usually required. When a customer comes in with a particular request and possibly even an idea of a solution, a conversation can usually reveal that there are possibly other solutions, maybe quicker workarounds that can be implemented. And so this is a dialogue that needs to happen. This is a back and forth. And so rather than just reflecting, here's what we'll do for you because we heard it, we always ask several layers of questions under that first one so that we can actually get at the real meat of the problem, because that's where we can actually deliver the kind of experience that we've acquired over the last 20 years. Now, here's another model I want to introduce, okay? And this is really starting to get into what AI and artificial intelligence, if you want to expand that term, really is providing. If you take a look at what humans do, the live agents, they're looking at information. This is the data that's coming in on the left. And eventually, out of that data, they're trying to decide what to do and then to take action based on it. It's a very simple process of saying, what's going on? What do I need to do? Let's go do it. Well, if you look at the middle piece here, which is between the data and the decision, if we want to apply some technology, some tools, some automation into this process, there are a number of different ways. As you go from top to bottom, you can see that the blue part is the part that we may give to the technology. In other words, at first, you would start with the technology saying, just tell me what happened, okay? That's operational analytics. Just look at the data. What is the data telling me? The next step is to say, what is the problem? Maybe I can diagnose this for you, okay? And so you can do this based on the different metrics you have, the different logs you have, as well as the journeys that the customers are traversing through your website. Beyond that, you can actually then say, I've seen these patterns before. Let me actually say, because of the patterns I've seen, most likely the customer is calling about XYZ. And this is where the learning begins to kick in. You're predicting now what it is that the issue is. But once you've actually done that well, now you can actually take some of these solutions and say, if we actually know what the problem is, and it's a solution I know how to deliver, then the next step is to try and automate some of these so that the agents can be freed up from this repetitive task. Not only does it free up agents, but it also ensures that the solution is provided to the customer in a very consistent, high quality, and measurable way. And then once you've got this done, now you can consider doing some process design changes. You can actually now start stitching together your business processes a little bit differently in this term, orchestration. So this slide is meant to convey that as you introduce technology, you can actually give it more and more responsibility, starting with operational analytics, going through these various stages, eventually going into process design, process change, and eventually business transformation, digital transformation. Okay? This particular graphic also says, here's how we approach introducing technology, okay? And AI is one of these things where if you do it right, you understand it, you can explain it, and then you can actually improve it. It's curious, however, that the current techniques in machine learning, one of the drawbacks of them is that they're not easy to understand. They're not easy to explain. It's not easy to tease out how hundreds or thousands of parameters get tweaked by these automated algorithms to actually come up with a better solution. So in this particular way of looking at things, you can look at the left side, which is business risk, and then you can look at the horizontal axis, which is whether or not you can capture and understand the knowledge or whether you cannot, okay? So it's interesting that machine learning starts in this area where, let's say you got a very low business risk, but you know that machine learning can give you some optimization. And it's going to be very low downside, so you want to just go ahead and apply it right there. The traditional expert systems were in this category down in the bottom right, where you actually could interview experts, spend hours and hours, maybe days and days, and really capture what they know, and then encode that into executable knowledge. Obviously, this has high payoff. You really want to spend that investment of interviewing your experts if you know that it's really going to make a big difference to your business. Okay, so that's the quadrant on the bottom right. Then you could probably extend that so that you could then gradually broaden the kind of expertise, but at that point you've really mined the high impact knowledge, but you're just kind of rounding it out so it's got less business impact than the first places where you actually try this knowledge engineering process. And then as you gain trust with your technologies, then you would actually then trust your machine learning to apply itself to these high leverage business applications. So this is how we migrate through these particular quadrants, okay? And you have to know where you are in the maturity leveraging of these technologies to know what's most effective and where you're going to be getting your ROI out of your investment. So at this point, with that theoretical background and how we actually view the breadth of AI available, I want to tell you about 2 or 3 different very interesting case studies, okay? So one of them is this company called EE. The current name is EE, but it actually started as a joint operation between Orange. It was a merger of Orange and T-Mobile that created this company called Everything Everywhere. That was about a decade ago in 2010. And then in 2012, it rebranded itself to EE, and very soon thereafter was acquired by British Telecom. And I think that was about 2016 or so. So that actually created a very prominent offering and company in the UK, because it was actually, I believe, the first to reach 14 million customers on the 4G network. It was the fastest 4G network in the UK. And it has somewhere around 550 or 600 retail centers all across the UK. But as it grew, it actually was encountering certain challenges, okay? And as you looked at the history, you could understand why some of those challenges took place. There were probably somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 agents, depending on what time you were talking about. And across this very large population of agents, you had a certain number of high performers, people who had actually been in the job, knew the products really well, knew the company really well. But then on the other end, the left-hand side, as is typical with large populations, you have people who are still coming up to speed, perhaps people who have not been on the job nearly as long, perhaps people who've had less training than others, okay? So the challenge was that customers were getting inconsistent information when they were calling into the call center. And in fact, they were experiencing that around 62% of their initial calls were actually resolving the customer's issue on the first try. That meant that approximately 40%, or 2 out of 5, didn't, and many of them would actually call again into the call center. So you can see, what a cost that was and what an issue that was with customer support. And not only that, it was not inducing confidence in the company on the part of the customers. So what they wanted to do was improve the way that these agents perform their jobs. But here's the next challenge. Because of the history of the company, they had 4 different support systems they were putting in front of their agents. They had T-Mobile's, they had Orange, and then that merger took place. And then as they went to this rebranding with EE and then eventually got acquired by BT, British Telecom, again, they were introduced to the BT suite of tools. So there was just a inconsistency of infrastructure, an inconsistency of tools being delivered to the agents, and obviously the knowledge underneath them was going to be different as well. So that was one challenge. So what they saw was about 10% of their agents were really using these knowledge-based tools. I mean, that's almost not worth the investment, right? Because that means 90% of your agents are really relying on their own memory, on their own ability to solve these problems on the fly. And so this is why they were getting inconsistent results when customers called in. They were also keeping little cheat sheets on their own, the little manually entered issue resolution and issue categorization cheat sheets. And it turns out that the way they were encoding these when they were interviewing customers in their first 3 or 4 questions was not good at all. You know, there was dependency on ordering of the answers. There was just inconsistency of discipline on the part of agents. So the results they were getting from these tick sheets were very, very bad. And then here's the other astonishing thing. They had 20,000 articles in their knowledge base. And these agents were supposed to make sense out of which articles to bring to bear on a particular call. The person that actually provided this information to us, by the way, said that when he started in the contact center at EE, they had basically 20 pages of printed material that all agents were referencing. And over the years, this ballooned to these 20,000 articles. 20 pages sounds a lot more manageable than 20,000 articles. So they really needed to bring this to some kind of manageable process. So they engaged in a search for solutions, okay? And they eventually selected eGain. So on the face of it, it was because we had the right product capabilities, we had the knowledge management, we had the analytics, the AI, the engagement platform, we could provide the right channels. But more importantly, over time, they realized it was because we wanted to work with the company, EE, in order to partner with them. We knew that it was not just sell the product, deploy it, and leave. We wanted to make sure that the way that EE was using our platform was key. So we were engaged in a co-innovation partnership where EE required that we understand their business processes, and we wanted to make sure that EE understood our platform and could leverage our platform as best they could. So we definitely engaged in that partnership model. This was a co-innovation strategy that allows quick change. And I'm going to reference this later on in the talk by the way, so that as operational data came back to the company, you could look at it, you could analyze it, you could see what needs to be improved. We could then make that request of the engagement team or the product team, and actually within hopefully hours, but more likely days and weeks, we would actually have those changes back into the deployment and able to then see how that was affecting the business, hopefully improving the business. So here's what they did. They took those 20,000 articles, analyzed them, and over a period of years, came up initially, let's say three years ago, with 10 guided process cases that they would put in front of their live agents. And from that time, which is 2016, to November of last year, they've actually engaged us to go from 10 such guided processes to now 25 such guided processes. And that's what you see on this screen here. So the most commonly addressed issues when customers call in are these 25 issues. They're either billing issues, collection issues, communications issues, fraud, broadband. So anyway, you can read this. Hopefully you can with the screen in front of you. But in this way, each of these most popular 25 cases, these categories of issues, was immediately available to the live agent with a single click. In addition to which, on the right, you had the customer context. You know what the customer's account information is, you know what products they own, you know whether or not they've actually called in before, you know whether or not they've paid their bill. So that information is already available at the time that the agent is now interacting with the customer. Then when the guided process is invoked for the live agent, here's what the agent sees. By the way, they call the system Albert. You can probably guess why. A very smart person. So they would just call this Albert. So anyway, the question that the system really wants answered would be this question on the left. But in the middle here would be some particular guidance for the live agent. Here's what you do, here's what you say, and for regulatory purposes, if you actually need to read something verbatim, it would be included here as well. On the right would be the customer information, specifics, and interestingly, you'll see it may be a little bit hard to read, but there's a reset button here and there's also a feedback button here. I mentioned the feedback button here because what EE realized is that in the knowledge is the power. This is actually a common phrase from the early 80s at Stanford, by the way, ITK-LTP, when you're dealing with smart systems. In the knowledge lies the power. So what this feedback button allows you to do is have an agent immediately be able to provide feedback to the knowledge authors or the case-based reasoning authors of what worked well, what didn't work well. And the commitment that EE made to the live agents, this is best practice, by the way, was that any piece of feedback they received, they would provide a response to the agent within 24 hours. And that would mean, okay, we're going to work on this, or no, we've actually considered it, and here's why we're not going to do it. But anyway, the live agent would hear within 24 hours what the knowledge team was going to do with this. This is extremely key because, as you know, suggestion boxes get no suggestions when they're not acted upon or when you get no response back. So anyway, EE understood this, and they put a feedback button here, and they committed to themselves 24 hours was the maximum they would take to get back to the live agent if the live agent actually took the time to submit that feedback. So this is how the knowledge gets improved. This is how the case bases get improved over time. And so for the better part of, let's say, 8 or 9 years for the engagement time that we've been with this particular company, the knowledge has constantly been in refinement, which is why they're able to achieve the results that I'm about to show you. I was mostly talking about this slide. I should have gotten one more. So anyway, this slide is a bit more detailed. It's a bit more blown up based on the one that I showed you earlier. Apologize for that. So here's what they are able to see. As I mentioned, without the system, their agents were initially doing first call resolution at approximately 62%. Once they implemented this guided help, they're now able to achieve, as of November of last year, first call resolution at 85%. So if you're thinking about this from a percentage standpoint, in pure percentage points, this is a 37% increase, okay, 23 ticks. But you look at it in a different way as well. At 62%, 2 out of 5 of your customers were not getting their issue addressed. That means that they would likely either be unhappy, they would leave you, or they would call back into the call center trying to find somebody who was more competent. At that 85% figure, now this is much closer to 1 out of 6 or 1 out of 7. Now, obviously, they want to keep doing better than that, but that's an astonishing improvement. You can see how that would actually reduce the subsequent second call, third calls, all trying to, eventually get at the solution, which if you had the guided process in the first place, you would have been able to address most likely at 85% probability. The second key data point is, for those of you who are familiar with Net Promoter System, the NPS score went up 30 points. This is non-trivial. Companies can spend millions of dollars to try and get these kind of results. So this is astonishing, but then look at the third metric as well. Live agents, who sometimes took 6 to 9 months to get to competency, were now reaching competency in 3 months. And this is direct from E, by the way. In addition to which, the training impact, they normally took 14 days to train brand new agents. They were able to reduce this to somewhere around 8 days. That's almost a 50% reduction in training. They were no longer teaching about products. They were no longer teaching about specific diagnostics approaches. They were actually teaching them how to use the guided process so that the guided process could then lead the agent through a lot of that diagnostics. So this is the EE story. It's really phenomenal. And what I really want to emphasize, though, is this didn't happen overnight either. Okay, so this took a few years before they actually were able to get these kind of results. But this is what you can do if you're actually committed and you actually know what you're going after and you're really serious about improving your engagement with your customers and leveraging the kind of products and capabilities and partnerships that eGain offers. The next study, this is a government study. I'm not going to spend nearly as much time on the next couple of case studies, but it's that this is an overseas deployment, by the way, where the key metric here is in just a few months, they have actually achieved a 77% improvement or deflection. In other words, 77% of the people who are interacting with, I think this is Ruth, by the way. Ruth is the chatbot you see on the right. By answering questions, Ruth was able to respond adequately to 77% of the 370,000 sessions. What that means is those are sessions that were prevented from calling into the call center. And at whatever you actually estimate, we're $7 or $8, per call. That's a lot of calls. That's a lot of cost that's been saved by allowing a virtual assistant to interact with a customer and do that initial assessment of what is the issue, and then try and see if they could actually resolve it for them. The next one is actually a very recent deployment. Many of you have probably heard of H&R Block, headquartered in Kansas City, one of the preeminent tax preparing companies in the United States. But they engaged with us late last year, second half of last year. And from the time that we engaged with them to the time they made the decision, we actually went live in approximately 3 months with a virtual assistant and a live chat and co-browse offering. So what they're doing is offering chat if the customer gets stuck. If you do the do-it-yourself tax preparation online, you may occasionally need assistance, and that's where they offer chat. And initially, a chatbot, the virtual assistant, comes on and asks you what you need. This is the interaction. The chatbot would actually do an initial assessment. It would then escalate to a live agent if it was not able to resolve the issue for you. And then if the customer accepts that offer, then it says, hey, you're now in the queue, ready to talk to the agent. And oh, by the way, it's likely to be about 3 minutes before you reach a live agent, okay? But the whole process here was engineered. The cases were actually supplied by H&R Block. Their own engineers worked on the languaging and the dialogue and the phrasing of this set of cases. We supplied them the tools, we supplied them the training, but the H&R Block team took on the responsibility of designing the virtual assistant themselves. And this is what the agent sees. So the agent will actually see that the bot was interacting for about 4 or 5 different interactions up until the point that the live agent was actually engaged. And then off to the right, you could see that the customer context is provided to the live agent. So it's a seamless handoff from the chatbot to the live agent. Now, in addition to having chat, if the agent would actually, as I mentioned before, say, hey, rather than telling you, let me show you, they can now offer this consulting solution, where now you can actually be sharing the same page between the customer and the live agent, and both of them could be looking at each other's pointers or mice. And then depending on your business rules, we can actually have the agent just look over the shoulder of the customer, or if you allow it, the agent can actually type in some values as they're interviewing the customer and do the work for the customer in a live co-browse session. These are business rules that are configurable by you, and we have about a dozen or so such business rules that you can customize as you engage with us. So that was H&R Block. They actually went live about a couple of months ago, and this is the middle of tax season. We know it's in deployment for them, and we're actually watching their engagement, but we're very hopeful that all of their customers are happy with the solution. And if you actually want to try it, go to H&R Block and sign up and interact with it. So at this point, I wanted to say we've emphasized how we approach the whole category of offerings called AI, or artificial intelligence. We've also emphasized that we work with you in a partnership in order to make sure that we don't just deliver your product, but we actually are really committed to making sure that you get the business value out of our products. So what we have here is a 30-day innovation program that is as close to low risk as possible for you. What this means is, if you decide to seriously take a look at whether our chatbot or our guided process or our machine learning can actually be of benefit to you, we ask a couple of things. We ask that you give us some data, hopefully a nice sizable set that we can actually make sense out of, and we ask for a little bit of time, maybe 2 or 3 half-hour calls. But then in 30 days, we commit to you that we will actually put together a demonstration of how our products can address your business use case. And in 30 days, if we actually show you how this can work, all we ask is that you come to the table and have a really serious discussion with us. Up until then, there is no risk to you. There is no other commitment other than the data and the time guidance from someone who actually is somewhat knowledgeable. And we will actually take on the risk ourselves. Our team will engage. We've actually done this for dozens of customers already. So that's why we're very confident in how we can deliver value with this, okay? Now, it is not the case that we always can say, this is it. Sometimes the data does not show that it's going to be effective, and that we may want to recommend that you wait. But that's a decision we will make based on what we see in the data. And again, it's of no risk to you, the person considering this, okay? So really contact us, and we will actually engage with you in this conversation, and we'll start that 30-day clock ticking. The last comment I will make is that in talking about AI and artificial intelligence, people talk about the I. They think that what they're going to see is real intelligence, but they forget often that there's an A in front of the I. What I really want to emphasize is, if you really understand that this is AI, then you can actually get rid of the hype. You can take a look at where this is realistic, where this is likely to deliver value in a short amount of time. One of the things I sometimes say to prospects that I'm talking to is, think of AI as a child. Okay, a child is intelligent, but a child is not necessarily competent at the level of a 35-year-old on day one when it's born, right? You invest in this child, you nurture the child, you take care of it, you actually, prevent a few little errors now and then, but you know that this is going to pay off if you actually have the patience. So we are here to say, if you have that understanding of our platform, our offerings, and are willing to take a look at AI as something you will take care of, nurture, keep teaching, keep refining, keep guiding, then we're the right partner for you. We will help you do this. We'll apply our decades of expertise and our teams that have all of this experience, and we'll show you in 30 days how you can actually leverage our platform for your business case. So at this point, I think that's the end of my prepared remarks. Hopefully I haven't gone too much over time. And so I think, Nick, are we going to open this up now to some questions and answers, some Q&A?
Yes, thank you very much, Sam, for your presentation. I wanted to also thank the audience for tuning in so far. I do understand if you need to run, but just remember that this webinar will be recorded and available in the next 48 hours. So with the time remaining, I do want to open up to some of the audience questions that have come in. So Sam, the first question was, what are some of the main barriers to AI adoption that you are currently seeing?
Ah, so we could actually go on for quite a long time on this particular question alone. We see a number of things. One of the things that we see is people can sometimes treat AI as a technology. And so they take a look at the latest and greatest offerings, whether it's from the latest, six-person startup out of Harvard, or whether it's the latest, hot investment out of Silicon Valley. But they don't understand that it needs to be taken in context. So if you're looking at a technology, then you yourself have to understand the entire business process and how this technology can be improved. So what I'm about to say is, don't think of AI as a technology. Think of it as a component of an entire approach that includes a lot of experience, that includes a lot of past, shall we say, hard-earned lessons. The next thing I will probably say is that sometimes you take a look at what's theoretically possible, and you take a look at all the possible integrations, whether it's with CRM systems or whether it's with ERP systems or accounting systems or whatever, and you're not possibly leveraging the most immediate benefits right away. So don't take a waterfall approach. What I would actually really suggest, and AI and machine learning, by the way, is particularly conducive to an agile approach. Do what you can today, see what results you're actually getting today, and then improve it tomorrow. So that's the approach that we recommend, is that start with realistic expectations, start small, start with 2 or 3 weeks as a framework. Try and see if you can actually get something to be viable in that 3 or 4 week time frame, 2 or 3, 4 week time frame, and then improve it from there. Because if it's a good solid start, you can always improve it. So that's a couple of ways that we've seen. I could actually, like I said, spend hours on this one question because this is where the experience comes in. But perhaps I would invite you to engage with us and we can actually have this more in-depth conversation. But that's the first couple of things I'll say in response to that question. Over.
Okay, and then let me just see if I have this correct. So people treat AI as a technology, but it needs to be taken in context. And perhaps is that where you mentioned before how companies, if they're going to, for example, work with eGain, they have to provide a data set of some kind in order to provide that context. And so that way you're able to create that AI solution, and that's where the context comes in. And then also too, mentioning how that AI should be seen as a component, as an approach. So you mentioned agile, and so AI should be used as a process that constantly adjusts to whatever inputs are being received.
Yeah, thanks for recapping that. In fact, this is almost necessary. You cannot treat AI and artificial intelligence, in my opinion, as you would maybe an off-the-shelf software product, right? The whole point to intelligence is that it can learn and improve over time. And that's the investment, that's the recognition I would urge you to take. Don't just think I'm going to get it today, it's going to perform at this level for the rest of its life. That's the wrong model to think of AI. The right model is it's going to perform at whatever level I teach it today. And then today I can look at the operational metrics. I can look at where it's succeeding. I can look at where it's potential for improvement exists, and I can invest in that potential. So I can give it more cases in that gap so that it understands better, or I can give it more training data, or I can actually improve the number of iterations I run this through in order to improve the performance of the system. Or if it's guided process, I can actually understand the details of the preconditions. I can understand, when it applies, when it doesn't apply. So all of those are approaches to making this AI technology work better for you over time. And I think that's the real key, is to have that time-based perspective that it's going to improve if you make that you make that investment.
Okay, yeah, and just going off of those processes you mentioned, those are all different approaches that, in the end, optimize or cause the AI to optimize towards whatever solution it's directed towards.
Yeah, thanks. Good.
Excellent. Okay, so for the next question, you mentioned the emphasis on the I in AI that lay people are seeing. So is AI different from knowledge? And if yes, how so?
Okay, so here's another, here's another topic that could take us hours. Yes, in fact, AI is applied to a wide variety of categories of, let's say, software capabilities. You may not realize it, but robotic walking, robotic arm movement, prediction engines, uh, image recognition, those are all considered AI or were at some point in time. See, the thing about AI is it's considered AI when it's at the bleeding edge of our capabilities. And once someone actually produces a working system in that category, all of a sudden a new term comes to be, and it's no longer called AI. So, whether that applies to robotics, whether that applies to image recognition, whether it applies to product recommendations, whether it applies to diagnostics, that's typically what we've seen over decades. But in this category, this small category, not small, but in the subcategory of things that we might call logic-based or case-based reasoning, then yes, knowledge, and in fact, that term also needs to be defined. There's two types of knowledge that I would urge you, at least two types. Okay, one is what we call content. Maybe you would call it static knowledge. This is knowledge that actually is written, is searched, and is provided as guidelines and is relatively passive. The other, I would say, is more active or executable knowledge. And this is knowledge that actually then leads from step to step and actually kind of operates almost like a wizard, if you're familiar with that UX metaphor. So in the case-based reasoning or in the diagnostic system you saw in the 60s and 70s and then further into the 90s and the 2000s, you might say that that's a more active executable kind of knowledge. But both are actually provided for and supported by the offerings that we give you in our platform.
Okay, so just to recap on that, AI traditionally had a broader definition that included many of these different applications that you had mentioned, such as robotic walking and image recognition. And so until these applications are defined by its use and then it creates a subcategory, when that happens, then it's no longer AI. Is that correct?
That's culturally what's happened. People will create a new label for it. But you'd be surprised at the number of things that were initially produced by AI researchers that are no longer called AI. Those of you in computing may even recognize the notion of stacks. Stacks even came out of AI research. So again, apologize about this, but I could go on about this topic for hours.
That's perfectly okay. But we do only have time for one more short question from the audience. So last question will be, you mentioned some of the use cases of your virtual assistant. What is lacking in chatbots today?
See, that's a really good question. If we have realistic expectations, then if you deal with the popular cases that come into your call center, you could almost say that nothing is lacking because we know how to handle those simple cases. But the leading point to that question really is how can you push the boundary? And I think the point to this is as you get into more and more fine-grained reasoning, the complexity, of course, rises. And how you deal with this complexity is still an art. I wouldn't say that we have off the shelf, pure cookie cutter template solutions to this. And in many of our recent deployments, we are definitely pushing the state of the art in how we apply this, what kinds of errors we tolerate, what levels of performance we deal with, and at what point we want to escalate from a chatbot into a live agent. Those are all things that are specific to a particular deployment context. So I'm sorry if that sounds like it's skirting, but a lot of it has to do with complexity and your expectations and wanting to make sure, as is the whole point to this talk, about making sure that everything is realistic so that you're actually able to take small steps at a time and not try and leap into an abyss and then lose all your investment. Over.
And so, in other words, as the chatbots get a little bit more sophisticated and you push the state of the art, you'll find more instances where the chatbot will be able to help out customers in more complex solutions and have less escalation points to where a live agent will have to come in. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that needs to be done with care, and it needs to be done with a lot of testing, and so that's why all the more important this whole perspective of really learning that AI is something you want to be patient with, and you want to invest at the right level in, and not just kind of a fire and forget approach.
Okay, and that makes sense. All right, and so that's all we'll be covering for today. I hope you all had half as much fun as I did. Thanks to our sponsor. I want to extend thanks to our sponsor, eGain, of course, as well as our Sam Han, our guest Sam Han, and all of you for attending. I'm Nicholas Rodriguez, and you can find Customer Experience Update on Twitter at CX Update, and you can find Customer Contact Central at CUST_contact. Thanks for joining us, and have a great day.
Thanks much, all.